Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive with us. We're going to take a look at this whole U.S.-Canada trade situation everyone's talking about.
Yes.
It's been all over the news, a lot to unpack.
Definitely a lot of moving pieces.
We've got a bunch of reports, different takes, and we're going to try to make sense of it, cut through the noise.
Absolutely.
What's really going on here? So, early March, President Trump, he slaps these tariffs on steel and aluminum imports, and it wasn't just Canada.
Right.
It was Mexico and China, too, a three-way thing.
Yeah, often gets overlooked. Everyone focuses on just the Canada angle.
Yeah, and the markets, they kind of freaked out, right?
Big reaction, yeah.
Canada hit back right away with their own tariff.
Immediately. Retaliation was swift.
China, too. But Mexico, they held off. Kind of interesting. Then we had these, high-level phone calls, exemptions announced, some pretty strong statements from both sides.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a roller coaster so far.
Yeah.
A lot happening very quickly.
Super fast. So, first week of March, boom, everything's different.
And I think it's important to note, this isn't the first time we've seen this kind of tactic from the Trump administration.
Yeah.
Remember the steel and aluminum tariffs a few years back? So there's a pattern here, a pattern of unpredictability that I think, is really at the heart of what makes this so difficult.
It's unsettling.
Very unfair.
For businesses, for markets, for people just trying to figure out, what's going to happen to the price of stuff.
Exactly. And that's the thing. It's not just, big corporations that are affected by this. This trickles down to, the price of orange juice at the grocery store, the cost of a new car. These tariffs can really impact everyday goods.
Yeah, that's what I think a lot of people miss. It's like, oh, trade war, that's, big business stuff. But no, it hits your wallet directly.
Absolutely.
So let's break this down a bit. We got to start with the timeline because it's just been so fast. February, Trump announces these tariffs, then delays them, and then all of a sudden they're on for March 4th. It's like, bam.
It's that uncertainty, right? That's
Yeah.
the real weapon here. Just constantly keeping everyone on edge. Maybe hoping for some last-minute concessions.
Yeah, but that didn't really work out, did it?
No, not really.
March 4th hits, 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum from Canada, Mexico, 10% on China, boom, markets go haywire. In Canada, they don't mess around. They hit back immediately, $21 billion worth of tariffs.
No hesitation. They had their list ready to go.
Orange juice, peanut butter, motorcycles.
It was a targeted list.
Targeted.
Aimed at things that would get attention. And it really highlights that interconnectedness between the U.S. and Canada. Canada supplies a massive amount of U.S. oil, electricity, critical minerals. So when you hear, President Trump saying, we don't need them, well, the reality is a bit more complicated.
Way more complicated.
And I think Canada's response shows they're ready to play hardball, even if it hurts.
They're not backing down.
No, they're not. Yeah. They really are intertwined.
It seems like a lot more is at stake here than just some tariffs on steel and aluminum. It's about a bigger relationship.
Absolutely. This goes way beyond just specific commodities.
Yeah.
We're talking about the whole trade relationship, economic security.
Yeah.
Even national pride gets tied into this stuff.
So Canada hits back with tariffs. Then things get even more intense. March 5th phone call between Trudeau and Trump.
Oh, yeah. That phone call.
Described as colorful, to say the least.
Let's put it mildly.
Reports say it was heated, some strong language thrown around.
Apparently quite a bit about Canadian dairy protections.
Interesting. So same day as that phone call, Trump meets with American car CEOs.
Right.
Encourages them to move production back to the U.S. to avoid tariffs.
The auto industry is always a big factor in these things.
Huge. And then that night, an exemption for U.S. automakers gets announced.
But there's a catch.
There's always a catch. They have to comply with the USMCA.
Right. The USMCA. That's a big
Yeah.
one. This whole situation is tied up with that trade deal.
Okay, so USMCA is clearly important. But before we get too deep into that, let's talk about Mexico. They didn't retaliate with tariffs right away.
Nope. They took a very different approach.
It's almost like they knew something Canada didn't. Instead of striking back President Sheinbaum, she goes the diplomacy route.
Much more focused on direct engagement with President Trump.
Yeah, and it worked. She gets Trump to back down in one phone call.
It was pretty remarkable to see.
She presents data on fentanyl, emphasizes the security cooperation between the U.S. and Mexico.
It seems like she really appealed to some of Trump's priorities there.
Yeah, she knew what she was doing, but here's the thing, even after this win, she still holds that protest festival a few days later.
Keeping up appearances.
Right, keeping things calm, but still looking strong for the folks back home.
Smart strategy, really avoided the public spats, got what she wanted, and doesn't look weak domestically.
Okay, so we've got Canada taking a strong stance, hitting back right away, and Mexico playing it cool and diplomatic.
Two very different approaches.
Raises the question, is one better than the other? What happens when things heat up again? Is this sustainable?
We'll have to see how it all plays out, but it definitely highlights the importance of those personal relationships in Trump's diplomacy.
Yeah, for sure. So March 6th, another twist. Trump announces a 1-month pause on tariffs for both Canada and Mexico.
Things were moving fast.
But there's a condition: this pause only applies to goods that comply with the USMCA.
Right, so he's using these tariffs as a way to push for more North American manufacturing.
Okay, so let's actually talk about USMCA. What does that even mean for people who don't follow trade deals closely?
Right, so basically this trade deal says stuff needs to be mostly made in North America.
Okay.
To move between the countries tariff-free.
So like a Buy North American thing built right into the agreement.
Exactly, and Trump's using these tariffs to enforce that.
To make sure companies aren't just, getting everything from China and then slapping a Made in Mexico label on it.
That's a big concern.
Yeah.
There's always worries about Chinese goods coming in through Mexico and avoiding tariffs.
So the tariffs are like a way to close those loopholes.
You could see it that way, trying to make sure the trade deal is working as intended.
But we saw that some stuff that did comply with USMCA still got hit with tariffs initially.
Right, so it's not the only factor at play here.
It's almost like he's saying, I'm willing to play fair, but only if everyone plays by my rules.
It's about control exerting influence.
Canada responded by pausing further retaliation, but they're keeping their initial tariffs in place.
They're not backing down.
Nope. And then you've got Ontario and BC saying they're continuing with their own actions, too.
It's a multi-level situation.
It's like a trade war within a trade war.
Multiple layers of complexity.
We need to take a closer look at this USMCA and how it all fits together.
It's the key to understanding this whole thing.
Okay, so we've got this temporary truce, but what happens after April 2nd? Will these tariffs come back full force? Like, what happens then?
Well, it's tough to say for sure. Trade, especially with how unpredictable things have been with the U.S. lately, well, predicting it is a challenge, to say the least.
It feels like anything could happen.
Absolutely. But we can, look at the trends, think about what's likely, and try to anticipate what could happen.
So let's start with that April 2nd deadline. What happens if those tariffs come back?
Well, Canada and Mexico have said they're ready to retaliate. We could see this back and forth, tit for tat, with even more tariffs on more and more goods. Basically, a full-blown trade war. No clear end in sight.
Okay, so that's not a good scenario, and I imagine that would have pretty big consequences.
Oh, absolutely. Businesses would face higher costs, supply chains would be disrupted, and people buying things would probably see prices go up. Nobody wins.
And wouldn't that hurt the relationship between these countries? Things already seem tense, at least between Trudeau and Trump.
Yeah, you're right to point that out. A trade war like that would make it a lot harder for these countries to work together on, well, anything, really.
Yeah.
Security, the environment, anything. It could have big consequences beyond just trade.
So, worst case, full-blown trade war. What about a best-case scenario? Any chance they could just work this out? Some kind of trade peace treaty or something?
It's possible, but I don't think it's likely, at least not right away. Negotiations are happening, but there are some big issues. Like, Canada wants those steel and aluminum tariffs gone completely, and they don't want to change their dairy rules. Mexico, they've been more willing to talk, but they've also said they'll retaliate if things don't go their way. Everybody's going to have to give a little to make this work.
And even if they do make a deal, is there any guarantee it'll last? Trump has walked away from deals before.
Right, you never know. Yeah. Which makes me think a third scenario is more likely, at least in the short term. Kind of an uneasy stalemate.
What do you mean?
Well, the tariffs might come back, but not on everything. Maybe just on some industries. Or maybe they'll be used as bargaining chips, to get what they want in negotiations. It keeps the pressure on without completely destroying the trade relationship.
So, back and forth, with tariffs being used more strategically.
Exactly. But even then, the uncertainty is still a problem. Businesses can't plan for the future, and that can hurt the whole economy.
Okay, so much to think about. For everyone listening, what should they be paying attention to as this all plays out?
Well, pay attention to what the leaders are saying. Are they talking about compromise, being willing to work together, or are they making threats and blaming each other? How they talk can tell you a lot. Also, pay attention to which industries are being targeted with tariffs. That can tell you what they really care about.
So listen to how they talk and follow the tariffs. Got it. Anything else?
Keep an eye on those negotiations. Are they making any progress? And watch out for any big changes in the tariffs. Are they adding new ones? Taking some away? That'll tell you if things are getting better or worse.
All right, lots to watch. It's complicated, but I think we've helped people understand it a little better.
Hopefully. And I would add one more thing. This trade war isn't happening in a vacuum. It's part of a bigger trend. The global economy is becoming more fragmented.
You're talking about that move away from free trade, more protectionism.
Right. And that has a huge impact on businesses, consumers, the whole global economy.
Yeah.
So when you're thinking about this U.S.-Canada trade war, remember, it's part of something much bigger, something that's going to continue to change the world.
So this is just the beginning?
In a way, yeah.
Well, this has been eye-opening. I feel like I understand this whole situation a lot better.
That's great to hear. And remember, even when things are uncertain and complicated, there's always something new to learn. That's what makes these deep dives so interesting.
Totally agree. Thanks for joining us, everyone. We'll be back next week with a whole new topic to dive into. Until then, stay curious.